Welcome back, deranged viewer. Today we're going to be talking about the World Conspiracy Theory Iceberg. This is a chart that went really viral not that long ago, specifically on TikTok, and I tried to do a series about it on there, but I kept getting a whole bunch of strikes saying something about integrity and authenticity, and they're saying that I was like a danger to the community or something like that. So instead, I decided that this was a way better place to do this series. This chart is something that I found on there. It is now deleted everywhere. I couldn't find it anywhere else other than I had screenshotted it in pieces, and now I have combined it back into the full chart that it was originally created as. But it's called the World Conspiracy Theories Iceberg. It has different things on there like the time cube theory, dead air, and then even more crazy things like North Korea equals utopia. But I'm just going to be talking about these things briefly, and disclaimer, some of these are dark and they have to do with death and other scary things. I'm not saying that these things are real. I'm simply just explaining what these theories are. This is for educational purposes only. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. But real quick before I get into the video, I don't have any sponsorships. So today is sponsored by my merch. We have this limited time Explore the Mysteries America's National Park shirt that is only available until October 31st. You got to get it now if you want it. And then we also just released this new shirt. It is a hieroglyph psychopoly merch shirt. And then obviously the classics, Hollow Earth, so epic, Kraken is real, I got a lobotomy in 2004, and of course the cryptid hunting team. So if you want to get your merch, you can get it today. This is only on sale until October 31st until it is gone forever, so get it now. And thank you for watching the ad, and back into the video. I am just going to be briefly talking about each one of these topics. I'm not going to try to dive in too deep because some of these just are such rabbit holes that it would be hours and hours, and I don't want to go that far in because it would just take too long to explain them all so deeply. This first tier, I'm sure you guys have heard of all the topics on here, such as the Loch Ness Monster, the Illuminati, Atlantis, so I'm going to skip this one. So I'm going to start off on the second tier, Time Cube. So this is a pseudoscience conspiracy theory about time itself. So this man is the self-proclaimed world's smartest man. His name is Otis Eugene Ray, and in 1997 he proposed this theory that is really kind of hard to understand, but basically it's about how time is not linear but rather all happening at the same time, and that Earth has cubic symmetry, and that time rotates in 4 simultaneous corners, leading to this idea that one day is actually 96 hours. 4 24-hour days in one single Earth rotation. It's split into these 4 sections: morning, afternoon, evening, and night, each representing a different reality. If you don't understand this theory, that is okay. I don't really think you're supposed to. Honestly, on this entire chart, this probably is the most hard to understand one on here. Even the scientific community overwhelmingly reject this theory and they find it incoherent and unintelligible, but some people say that he's really got something going here, he's cooking something up, and it makes sense to them. But yeah, I guess those events are happening at the same time on Earth. Like there is daytime and nighttime and evening and morning all happening at the same time. But how could we accidentally not know that there's 96 hours in a day, but rather anyways, we're moving on to the next one. Taurus Earth. This is just the idea that Earth is not round, but rather in this kind of donut shape, and that instead of gravity working like we think it works, it is rather like there's jelly inside of the Earth donut that is pulling everything towards it, and Donut Earth. I think this was made up to make fun of flat earthers. So Nikola Tesla. So Nikola Tesla was a brilliant inventor back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He is mainly known for his major breakthroughs in alternating current electricity. There's a lot of different weird things about his life and some of the things he did. Some people think that he created like borderline mystical technology, such as the alleged death ray or particle beam that some people claim he created, that they say was so powerful that the US government confiscated it. Or there was other smaller things, such as the rumor of his earthquake machine, which was said to be this mechanical oscillator device that was designed to generate powerful vibrations to resonate with certain objects using their natural frequency, such as resonating with a structure or with the actual vibration of Earth itself. And there's like a big thing where people think he created this thing and that it was like 7 inches, it was tiny, and that it fit in his pocket. And anyways, he turned this thing on and it vibrated so much that it caused an earthquake in New York, which is kind of crazy because this real thing did happen. That's not a conspiracy, where he created a small steam-powered generator, and when he was testing it out in his laboratory in Manhattan, he actually caused the surrounding area to shake so violently that the neighbors called the police thinking that there was an earthquake. Which, why would you call the police if there was an earthquake? But that's beside the point. The main thing that's so interesting about Nikola Tesla is that he had this large-scale experiment that he was conducting in Colorado Springs on alternating current technology that led him to the conclusion that he could build this huge worldwide wireless electricity and communication system that would use Earth itself by injecting massive amounts of electrical current into the ground to send electricity very long distances across the planet to power other things. Anyways, he was trying to build this system, and he built the very famous massive Wardenclyffe Tower, which sadly this project ended up failing. However, there's a big conspiracy theory around this where people think that he was successful. However, the government or other like DC electricity power tycoons did not want him to be successful, and they sabotaged him. And it is really sad because he was a genius guy, and I believe he died broke and seemingly basically alone. It seems like he doesn't get the amount of credit that he should have gotten for the amount of really cool stuff he ended up creating for humanity. Third tier, we are moving on to the Denver airport. So there's a very famous conspiracy theory that I'm sure you know about the Denver airport, about how people think that the elites have this secret underground bunker beneath there, and in case there's a global catastrophic event, they would all go there and be safe. And adding on to this theory, there's a lot of weird like doomsday themes there at the airport, such as that large mural there, In Peace and Harmony with Nature is what it's called, and it depicts what seems like a doomsday event and then what Earth would be like afterwards. And people think that it's like the New World Order that it's depicting, and that like they wipe out a portion of humanity and only keep a certain amount of people that they can control directly. And there's also like Lucifer, the giant blue horse statue that some people think is like a reference to the book of Revelation, the pale horse. And along with that statue, there is that story about how whenever the sculptor was putting the head on Lucifer, it actually fell off because it's a huge sculpture and the head landed on the artist and killed him. That actually did happen, which is kind of crazy. Anyways, back whenever Obama was president, there was this situation whenever this asteroid was passing by Earth, and some people were worried it was actually gonna interfere with Earth or get too close and actually hit us. Anyways, people think Obama was there in the bunker at the Denver airport as the asteroid was passing, and I'm pretty sure for some reason he was going through the airport or something like that, so it does seem like he was there at that time, so maybe there is a bunker there. And there is a big argument that the Denver airport is strategically positioned to be the safest place to be during a doomsday event if there was a bunker there, because they're at such high altitude, whatever. There's a lot of different things. I'm not big on doomsday bunker planning, but people know about it apparently. All right, next up we got Roswell. So everybody knows about Roswell. There was this incident where this rancher discovered debris on his property, and initially it was reported by the US military as a flying disc. This statement, however, was quickly retracted, but the damage was already done, and people were going on about how the government covered up this extraterrestrial spacecraft and that they found alien bodies. They were doing studies on these bodies. Anyways, in reality, what I believe happened is this debris was actually, ironically, another secret project called Project Mogul, where there's this secret government project where they flew these high altitude balloons way up into the atmosphere, and they had microphones on these balloons because they were trying to hear the Soviets doing nuclear testing. They were trying to see if they were setting off nuclear bombs and testing them. And so maybe in order to draw attention away from that, they said, oh, it was a craft. Wait, no, it wasn't. And everybody was like, the Fermi Paradox. So the Fermi Paradox is just a question that asks if aliens are so likely to exist because space is so massive and there's so many potentially habitable planets out there, why haven't we found any signs of life yet? There are some more scary portions of the Fermi Paradox that I love and hate at the same time, such as the dark forest theory, which is the idea that maybe alien civilizations, advanced civilizations out there, hide because they fear a super powerful predator in this dark forest that is space, and that these civilizations out there, if they were found at all, they would be completely wiped out instantly. Because if there was a super advanced civilization, they may look at humanity and say, these are bugs, these are less than bugs, and then when they have technology we can't comprehend, boom, we're gone. I mean, what are we gonna do? Hit them with pieces of metal that are moving really fast. Kind of like the Q in the story of All Tomorrows, where they come to our solar system and they see humanity and they're like, bugs? And they turn us into massive blocks of flesh that they build into pyramids, and they turn us into animals and stuff, into livestock. Gray goo. So this is a hypothetical doomsday scenario where humans create these tiny self-replicating robots that eat biomass in order to create more of themselves. So they can self-replicate, they can make more of themselves. So what do? They eat everything around them and turn everything into giant piles of gray goo, which is what they look like. They are tiny, little bitty robots, and as they make more, they pile up and look like gray goo. But you might ask yourself, why would we even create something like this? People argue the reason we would create something like this is because something like this might be extremely useful in medicine, or maybe we would create some sort of weapon that accidentally gets really, really powerful. I mean, how would we stop little bitty robots that are basically invisible? Anyways, they could potentially turn the entire planet into gray goo in this hypothetical scenario. Next, we got Aleph. So Aleph is this Japanese doomsday cult that was very violent. It was founded back in 1987 and was responsible for many attacks. Most famously, there was this attack in 1995 in the Tokyo subway where they used sarin gas to kill 13 people and injure thousands. Anyways, the leader of Aleph claimed to be like a messianic figure, and the group's beliefs kind of involved these predictions of a nuclear apocalypse, and this guy manipulated these people into thinking that he was the way to, I guess, survive this, and that they needed to do some stuff to, I guess, avoid it. I don't really know. Anyways, there is a conspiracy theory where some people believe that this group is still operating, and maybe they are used to do secret experiments for organizations that don't want to do it themselves, but they want to see what these chemical weapons do, and so Aleph is the easy way to do that. Moving on to the fourth tier, we are in a simulation. So this is exactly what it sounds like. Some people think that we're in a giant computer system and that there are sometimes even glitches in the system, such as the Mandela effect. Examples of this are things like the Berenstain Bears and the Berenstain Bears, or Fruit of the Loom. Some people think they used to have a cornucopia, which I guess they never did. Admiral Byrd's expedition. Admiral Byrd was this polar explorer and Navy officer who is best known for his Antarctic expeditions. He was in charge of Operation High Jump, the largest, most extensive exploration of both the sea and the air ever attempted on Antarctica. While many people believe that this was just a US Navy program to establish a research base there in Antarctica, others think there was a complete different reason for this expedition. And it is kind of weird. It happened right after World War II, like right as it was ending in 1946. There are a lot of conspiracies about how maybe the Germans went to Antarctica after the war, a bunch of them fled there, and that we went down there to actually fight them. And there are other conspiracy theories about how Admiral Byrd had this secret journal where he wrote about how he flew an airplane over the South Pole and then saw this giant gaping hole in the earth and flew inside of it and went to the city of Agartha and met these giant people. I think they told him to stop using nuclear weapons, or something in the story. But anyways, there's like this whole story about all that, and like there was different things like woolly mammoths in there, but then once they got inside the hole, it was like this lush jungle. And anyways, he got back, and then they were like, the government was like, nope, you can't talk about that, and it was a big cover-up, and that is the conspiracy theory about Operation High Jump and Admiral Byrd. Battle of Los Angeles. So this was this really strange event back in California, in Los Angeles, in 1942, where for some reason they thought they were under attack by the Japanese because they saw this unidentified flying object moving around, and so they just started blasting anti-aircraft into the sky. But officially it was said that what started all of the shooting was actually a weather balloon, and so they all started shooting at this balloon, and then for some reason other people in different areas joined in and just imagined targets and were shooting at nothing. And there was a picture published back in 1942 that shows searchlights focusing on what looks like an alien aircraft. And anyways, you know, a lot of people are gonna take this as aliens, in that maybe there was a big battle with aliens and we covered it up and said it wasn't anything at all other than a balloon. That'd be pretty cool if it did actually happen. Aztec Gold. So just like in Pirates of the Caribbean, there is this real world superstition that Aztec gold is protected by a curse. So there's actually multiple instances of bad things happening to those who try to take Aztec gold. For example, back in 1520, this Spanish conquistador, Hernan Cortez, and his men had took a bunch of the Aztec gold and were fleeing the Aztec capital. And when they were leaving, one of their boats that was carrying the most amount of gold actually sunk, and all the men drowned. There's also been a few other instances throughout history where different boats were carrying Aztec gold and they sunk, or mysterious events surrounding the gold led to people dying. You must be believing in ghost stories. You're in one. Alright, moving on to tier 5, we've got chemtrails. So this is a conspiracy theory about how whenever you look up into the sky and you see planes flying, you will see those white trails being left behind by the aircraft. The theory is that this is not just water vapor, but it is rather chemicals or some sort of biological agent being sprayed to be used either as weather manipulation or population control or even like psychological manipulations. And while I believe it probably likely is just water vapor in almost every instance, it does sound crazy that, you know, the government, they would never do something like this. They would never spray a population with some sort of chemical, right? Well, there was this real thing that the government admitted that they did back in 1950 and 1960, where the U.S. Army was conducting secret chemical tests on the general public in low-income neighborhoods in St. Louis, Missouri, where they sprayed zinc cadmium sulfide and other harmful carcinogenics in this community, and they caused people to actually get cancer. This one lady who lived in this area had 4 siblings that lived with her, and all 4 of her siblings died of cancer, and she herself battled cancer and survived. And you know, why would the government do this? They're sorry, guys. So they would never do this again. Alright, moving on to living water. When I first read this theory, I assumed it was probably referring to like the Christian term about how Jesus' blood is the living water that gives us eternal life, but rather this is a conspiracy theory about how water is actually alive. So this theory is that water is a living substance that can die if you don't treat it properly. People say that the way you measure the life of water is based on the type of crystals it forms whenever it freezes and turns into an ice crystal or a snowflake. For instance, they claim that whenever water forms more like hexagonal shapes and whenever it's very symmetrical and pretty, it is healthy living water. But what's really concerning is whenever people collect water from any major city, it tends to be less hexagonal and actually really misshapen, and so I guess some people consider this as dead water. And so they claim that the reason this water is so strange looking and misshapen is because it actually physically picks up negative energy from people that live in the city and from the pollution from the city. And also something to note is that whenever water gets more chlorine in it, it gets less water crystals too. Does chlorine kill water, or does that mean it's bad for you, or that it's dead when you put chlorine in it? Anyways, there's this other big thing where anytime there's like a sharp turn, such as like water turning in a pipe, it also makes water create less crystals. Believe it or not, I watched a documentary and they claim that whenever water turns in a pipe, it actually creates less symmetrical crystals somehow. Tell me how that makes any sense. Water acts differently because it's moved differently, because it wasn't flowing in a natural pattern? How crazy is that? Anyways, they say that maybe this dead water is unnatural and the forced movement made it die. I guess the big thing here is that water has memory from this theory. I don't know, it makes me want to drink out of waterfalls. Agartha. So this is the place that a lot of people like to say that Admiral Byrd made it to. Agartha is this legendary kingdom or city inside the center of Hollow Earth. This ties into ideas that Earth is either hollow or cavernous enough to house a large-scale civilization. What's strange about Agartha is different civilizations throughout history have all referenced a similar city like Agartha, such as Agartha in Hinduism, and also Norse mythology references something very similar too, and different world leaders have also tried to find it throughout history, such as Hitler during World War II, and so people theorize that Admiral Byrd made it there, and that Earth is hollow, and giants. There are giants inside of Hollow Earth. Moving on, we've got Greek fire. So Greek fire was some sort of secret fire weapon that people like to say the Byzantine Empire used around 600 AD. This fire gained almost mystical status because of how much of a guarded secret people like to say it was from the rest of the world. This is something that they used during warfare, where they would have these naval battles and then use these incendiary weapons to burn water itself and stick fire to surfaces and destroy ships and create fortifications using fire. It seemed to be deployed by using this large bronze tube that would project this liquid mixture from the Byzantine warships. Other people say that they use these like handheld versions where they would throw clay pots kind of like grenades, and they would, hit and blow up like a big fireball. And so some people think that this was some sort of really advanced technology, and they had this really strange formula for the Greek fire, and that it was deliberately destroyed or hidden to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. Because everybody likes to say that the Byzantine Empire had some sort of advanced technology that maybe came from aliens, and that it was far beyond their time, but they had it a long time ago. And they also say maybe it was destroyed in the Library of Alexandria fire, I believe. Sixth tier, Eye of Africa. So also known as the Richat structure, or just the Eye of the Sahara, this is a roughly 30-mile wide geological formation that kind of looks like a giant eye. Officially, the scientific opinion is that this structure was thought to be formed by some sort of like tectonic or volcanic activity, which people like to use as an excuse to dismiss the idea that this place could be Atlantis at all. But I feel like it could also be a geologic formation while also at the same time be an ancient city. So I don't know why that would dismiss it. Anyways, a lot of people claim that the Eye of Africa is the lost city of Atlantis, as it resembles the way Atlantis was described by Plato so many years ago. Atlantis was described as being this empire made up of 10 kingdoms, and then this lost city, which was the capital, was said to be made up of these concentric circles, 2 of water and 3 of land. And as you can see, the Richat structure appears to be exactly that, and even to have like a ton of salt just sitting there in areas where water would have been. So where does salt water come from? the ocean. What's really interesting is Plato actually learned of the story of Atlantis by it being passed down from generations, and one of the guys who first learned of the story was named Solon, and he claimed that he learned the story from an Egyptian who was much closer to the Eye of the Sahara. Anyways, nowadays a lot of people hate the idea of the Richat structure being associated with Atlantis at all, but I mean, please, we need Atlantis. I need this to be Atlantis. The moon is artificial, so this is a really fun one. There are quite a few reasons why people theorize that the moon is an artificial satellite. For one, people say that the moon appears to be millions of years older than Earth scientifically. Two, Earth is the only planet in the solar system that has a moon that is roughly 1/4 of the size of the planet, which is much larger than the moon to planet ratio anywhere else in the solar system. But the most strange, in my opinion, is the fact that the moon perfectly covers the sun during a solar eclipse, almost as if it is some sort of perfectly designed object that fits right over top of the sun. Do you ever think about that? Do you ever think about whenever there are these solar eclipses, how the moon just sits perfectly right there and blocks out the sun enough to make such a perfect solar eclipse ring? People also point to the strange seismic activities on the moon, such as how the moon experiences earthquakes or moonquakes, and that whenever it has these moonquakes, it shakes much longer than it seems it should, even quoted as Ringing Like a Bell by Clive Neal, this professor of geological sciences at Notre Dame University. Now, while most people think that the moon acts like this because it is very dry, others think that it is literally hollow, and that overall there is this theory that someone or something, perhaps some sort of other civilization, put this large hollow satellite thing in the sky to observe Earth, and it's watching us, and we're living in the Truman Show, and I'm filming myself and I am Truman. And anyways, yeah, hollow moon. Moving on, we have Skinwalkers. So Skinwalkers are these entities that came from Navajo legend about these witches who basically perform some sort of evil ritual, such as killing a family member, that allows them to gain this supernatural shape-shifting power to turn into animals. And these things are usually seen as very evil. They walk around in animal furs, and they usually try to disguise themselves as predators like wolves or coyotes, so that they can then shapeshift using their skins into these animals. Sometimes, though, they're also said to be able to control or possess these animals from a ways away, and they're very feared by their ability to mimic human voices and spread misfortune and curses and harm to others invisibly. It's actually really prominent today in today's culture. I'm sure you've heard of something like Skinwalker Ranch, which is this big show on whatever the channel is, I don't even know, where in Utah people have claimed on this ranch to experience strange phenomena, such as the story of this family that moved to this ranch in 1996 that kept seeing this huge wolf creature that was unusually calm around their family, but then it attacked their cattle, so they shot it a bunch of times, but the bullets didn't affect it, and then the guy probably was just a bad shot. But anyways, later on people are like, yep, UFOs, interdimensional creatures, other skinwalker-like creatures are all in this ranch, and there's a big dramatic show about it. My conspiracy theory is that Skinwalker Ranch made it up for the money. Moving on to the 7th tier, ancient aliens. So this is the idea that different things or civilizations or structures in the past were either greatly influenced or actually literally built by aliens that used to be here on Earth, or still are, and we're just in the shadows. So I'm sure you know the show Ancient Aliens on the Discovery Channel. They are always talking about the pyramids and Stonehenge and how it's made by aliens. There's also those giant picture things in the desert, the Nazca lines, that a lot of people like to say were made only for aliens, and that they were created so that aliens could find their way back down to Earth to find this civilization, because you can only see them from the sky. So who were they built for? There is also like the story of the Anunnaki, this alien race that came to Earth and enslaved humanity and gave them very special technology in the areas where they enslaved them and they were obedient. And I love that theory because it's like about how these aliens from this hidden planet that's inside our solar system, the planet comes around every so many thousands of years and the aliens jump off, enslave humanity, make us give them gold, and then in return they give, like the Sumerians is the story, advanced technology. Obviously, you know, the show, very popular, you know, the guy, Aliens, that guy, he's just like me for real. The Backrooms. So the origin of the Backrooms, if you don't know, came from this picture that went really viral online. It was this place that looked really eerie. It has this strange yellow wallpaper and it looks like a creepy office setting that has walls that don't make any sense and the lighting is really dim. But this picture got really popular online because people are like, wow, this made me feel very uneasy, but for some reason I feel like I've been there. So up until May 2024, no one actually knew where this picture was taken or where it came from. But we've now recently discovered that this image was taken of a furniture store in Wisconsin that had a lot of partitions, you know, to show off the furniture and where it should go. And they had like, you know, the weird fake inner walls and they used it as a furniture display while they were renovating it. So anyways, in the folklore of the Backrooms, it is this place where people no clip out of reality whenever they accidentally go to the wrong areas on Earth, I guess. Kind of like whenever you're playing a video game and you walk into a wall and clip through, you no clip through beyond the map. And the Backrooms is this maze that is this huge labyrinth of yellow walls, and usually it's associated with some sort of monster that's in there. Kane Pixels did an incredible series about the Backrooms on YouTube. It's the Backrooms found footage. I'm sure you've probably seen it if you know anything about the Backrooms, but I'd recommend watching that if you have not seen anything on it. I guess the conspiracy theory about the Backrooms is that maybe it exists and people can no clip out of reality off the map and go to this labyrinth, just like in Greek mythology where there was this labyrinth that the so-called demigods would go and fight these monsters, and Backrooms is modern day labyrinth. Skyquakes. So this is a worldwide unexplained phenomenon where people in different parts of the world all hear this similar strange sound that they call skyquakes. Usually it is described as a horn-like sound or just loud thunder, and they usually see it when there's no clouds in the sky, which makes you think it wouldn't be thunder. They say that these skyquakes might do things like cause vibrations in the room that you're in, and those that experience skyquakes usually don't have a clear explanation of what caused them, but usually it is reported by numerous witnesses that all hear relatively the same thing. Explanations for what they are range from them being like jets that are breaking the sound barrier to meteors burning up the atmosphere, or people even say they might be massive underwater caves that are collapsing in the ocean. But anyways, some people think that there literally is a sound that follows earthquakes that you would call a skyquake, and that it's like being generated from the ground vibrating and the tectonic plates moving. But as of 2025, we have no idea what they are for sure. The Sea Peoples. So the Sea Peoples were this big mysterious group of people that seemed to come out of nowhere and attack different civilizations along the Mediterranean Sea. And we have recorded evidence that they were so good at attacking that even Egypt, during their peak, when they were the most strong, were scared of the Sea Peoples. As far as exactly where they originated, they were likely this group of people from the tribes of Luca and Washeshes, whose origins aren't completely known, but basically they're pirates that were extremely good at attacking, and not only were they good at attacking, but they would grow in numbers as whenever they conquered new people, they would just add them to their ranks. So that would make them, you know, really unstoppable if they're not taking everybody out that they attack and rather growing. They mainly targeted coastal cities, especially in the Mediterranean around Egypt, and actually they were believed to be a major contributing factor to the Bronze Age collapse. However, that is still kind of partly debated. 8th tier, Pharaoh Akhenaton. So this is an Egyptian pharaoh that kind of looked like an alien. There are different conspiracy theories about him, like that he was an alien, or some people like to say that he was maybe Moses from the Old Testament, even though Moses would have lived like 1400 years before him. But anyways, there was this big thing where he decided to literally destroy all of Egyptian religion, and he forced everybody to worship one deity, Aten, which Atenism is the religion that he formed, which was to worship this god that was depicted as a disk of the sun, a disk of light, that people like to say, oh, he was worshiping what? A flying saucer? This dude is an alien. Anyways, he even moved the entire capital of Egypt and everybody in it to this random part of the desert where he was established as a cult leader around Akhenaton. Anyways, Aten's cult made their temples different from other Egyptian temples, as they didn't have roofs because they wanted to let the sunlight rays in. And anyways, this guy was very deformed looking, and he built temples in horrible desert with no roofs, so that was probably not the greatest building structure for that particular part of the world. Building 7. So this is referring to World Trade Center Building 7 that collapsed on 9/11. That was a building right next to the Twin Towers that they said got hit with debris and then a fire started that caused this building to collapse. There's a big conspiracy theory surrounding Building 7 about how there's no way it could have collapsed the way it did. A lot of architects also argue that there's no way the building just fell directly into its footprint because of fires. It doesn't really make any sense that it would do that. And also, it would have greatly helped out specific organizations that had floors on this building, like the CIA and the SEC, and allegedly that these organizations had financial crime records there, and it got destroyed in this building's collapse, which was very convenient for them. But overall, the conspiracy theory is that people think this building couldn't collapse like this, and that it had to be a controlled demolition. And of all the 9/11 stuff, I gotta say, Building 7 is the weirdest. And I'm not gonna dive into it too deep, but if you look into it, it's very weird. Quantum realm. So quantum realm is referring to, in quantum physics, on a subatomic level, so like a really small level, they say there are these quantum particles that react differently than regular sized particles, such as in the double slit experiment, which, to summarize, people observe these particles going out, and whenever people are observing it, it reacts differently than when they're not observing it. And anyways, the quantum realm idea is that on the quantum level, there are maybe entities with some strange power, and we don't know they're there, but somehow they are affecting these particles. And it's kind of like if Ant-Man went down there and was doing something. Anyways, keep in mind, all quantum physics is just a theory, and I am very much not qualified to talk about any of this stuff. So next we have the 9th tier, Phoenician colonization. So this is the theory that the Phoenicians, who were this group of people that lived in Eastern Mediterranean, were such good sailors that they may have reached America long before Columbus did, maybe around before the birth of Christ, between 1000 to 1 BC. The reason some people think this is because there are these artifacts that have inscriptions that some believe show Phoenician writing. There's no even definite proof that this is Phoenician writing, and people believe this theory because of things like the Dighton Rock and how there are these petroglyphs on there in Massachusetts, and there's also other alleged inscriptions of Phoenician writing in places like Brazil. But I mean, there's nothing. I feel like people just grasp at this so hard, and there's nothing there to grasp. There's no evidence whatsoever. The Voynich Manuscript. So this was a book in the 1400s that was created around Central Europe that contains this variety of strange pictures along with text in a language that no one has ever heard of or can even decipher. It is divided into 6 sections. One section is about plants, and there are like 113 unidentified plant species. There is also an astronomical section with charts of stars and planets and zodiac signs and such, and there is a biological section that shows women and tubes attached to the women, and there's other strange sections such as medicine, and it's just a funny book. It's constantly being debated about on whether the language is real and if it's like a lost language that we don't know about, or if there's some sort of cipher that would decode it. But a lot of people think that this book was like the first meme ever created, and that it was just a silly book that a guy did for fun. So, global cooling. So this was a scare back in mainly the 1970s, but people also went on about it in the 80s and the 90s, where people were really worried about a massive global cooling event that might cause a new ice age. So they were worried about this because of things like aerosol. They were also worried about the rocket launches that they were doing to go to space, and also they were worried about nuclear winter because of the whole Cold War thing going on, which actually is a really big risk. I recently saw this thing where if there was a full out nuclear war, we would likely have ice sheets across major bodies of water from Iowa all the way to Russia for 7 to 10 years. That is really bad. 10th tier, Skull and Bones Fraternity. So this is a secret society at Yale University that was established in 1832, also known as the Order of the Skull and Bones. This is one of the oldest, most prestigious college secret societies in the United States. Notable alumni are people like U.S. presidents like President Taft, George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and also senators, Supreme Court justices, and huge businessmen. What's interesting is the guy who created the Skull and Bones, this man named William Russell, established it back in 1832, and this man was greatly inspired by his time he spent in Germany as he observed these weird occult student societies there that were kind of like borderline satanic. And the Skull and Bones, it has a very occult looking symbolism with a skull and crossbones and the number 322, which kind of hints to esoteric meaning. And the more conspiracy theory part of this is that the Skull and Bones was created to put people in power over the world, but those people they wanted to have dirt on so that they could use them to control the world, and so they kind of blackmailed them by getting them to do these things in this fraternity, and that's the whole idea. Jules Verne. So this was the really famous author who wrote different books like Around the World in 80 Days, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Journey to the Center of the Earth. This is a theory that Jules Verne was more than just an author, and he was like a vessel of hidden knowledge, or even like a time traveler, who used his novels to encode real secrets and predictions about the future. There is a conspiracy theory that he had some sort of contact from someone in the future because he predicted things like in his book From the Earth to the Moon about how the moon launch site was also in Florida in his book, and he depicted the rocket looking like a projectile. So he got those two things right. And also in 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, he predicted a fully functioning electrical submarine with underwater propulsion and air recycling decades before practical submarines were even created. He even predicted different things like video communication and gas-powered cars in his other books. So it's really strange that this guy got so many things right. And anyways, if you haven't seen the old 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that is a good movie. I highly recommend watching that one. Also, the old Journey to the Center of the Earth, that's a good one too. Dead Air. Oh my gosh, guys. So dude, people are always going on about dead air and about how if you go into an abandoned building and it's been shut for a long time, the air is going to be dead and there's not going to be any oxygen in it, and you're going to walk into this building and not be able to breathe because there's no oxygen. Dude, it's just not true. It's like so many people online claim that when you're doing urban exploring, the most dangerous thing you can see, you need to watch out for dead air. What are you talking about? When has this happened? Maybe if you went down into a mine shaft, you might find something like that, where there's no airflow whatsoever and it's been sealed off for some reason. But the definition of dead air is air that doesn't contain enough oxygen for you to survive. As far as I can tell, it is completely exaggerated. Maybe there are some places, but there's almost no sources online that even says that this is really dangerous. I kind of think this is just kind of like a meme, like still water. People were going on about still water too, which is like whenever water is sitting still and it looks like you can walk on it, but it's still and it looks like ground, but it's water. Hidden continents. So this is the idea that there are hidden continents beyond the ice wall, and it usually ties in with things like, oh, Earth is flat and there is a giant ice wall that is Antarctica that surrounds the entire world as we know it, but beyond this ice wall there are different continents. I really like this one. This one is really fun to me. I like that in this map I'm looking at, they named them a lot of fun things like Nemo, and they got one named Odin and Aten. But if there were extra continents outside of this so-called ice wall, that would be so sick. Imagine how much more we'd have to explore, how many more mountains we had to climb. And then this map also has things like the abyssal ocean, the walls of Asgard, the scorched wastelands. Dude, I want this to exist so bad. Civilizations before humans, also known as the Cerulean hypothesis. This is a thought experiment about how, what if there were prior advanced civilizations before humans? Would modern science today be able to detect these things existing if, like, several million years ago there were, I don't know, maybe like dinosaurs that had a civilization or something like that? Personally, I like to think about Rome, where I went to Rome not that long ago, and you know, it was just like 1800 years after the Roman Empire fell or whatever. I'm not even saying that right, probably 1300 years after the Roman Empire fell. It's just, they found the Roman Forum, which is like the capital, buried in 13 foot of dirt. Like, it's so weird that dirt just piles up in random places as time goes on. And it's crazy to think that, you know, there was the most powerful empire maybe that the world has ever seen, other than the US, obviously, that was just forgotten about, and people left it and let it rot and let it get piled up with dirt, and now it's like one of the greatest tourist attractions in the entire world. Would we know if there was an advanced civilization pre-humans? I feel like we would. Fire is alive. So this is just kind of an argument that fire has the biological qualifiers to life, and that this actually applies more to fire than even viruses that people say is alive as well. So fire eats by consuming things, it breaks things down, it digests them, it grows, it reproduces, and it responds to its environment. So fire is alive. Firemen are committing genocide. The original Bible, I think this topic is just referring to how there's no one single preserved Bible that has existed forever, which wouldn't really be possible because, you know, the Bible is this collection of texts that has been written over centuries by various authors. I found it really interesting. I've been listening to this biblical scholar lately, Wes Huff, and he talks about how different Dead Sea Scrolls, which were, you know, parts of the Old Testament biblical manuscript, specifically the book of Isaiah, was, before they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest version they had was from like the Middle Ages. But they've recently found in the Dead Sea Scrolls a new, older version of the book of Isaiah that pushes the oldest version back 1,000 years to the 1st century BC. And so what's so crazy about this is that the Dead Sea Scrolls version of the book of Isaiah is so close to what we have today. It's like, people will argue and say, no, it's not the same, it's so much different. It's like, no, the only things that are different in it are like the punctuation and the way the words are kind of formulated in a sentence. As you know, I'm sure they were speaking some weird old dialect at that point. But Wes Huff argues that what we had 1,000 or even longer ago, about 2,000 years ago, is nearly 99% identical to what we have today, which is so crazy. As far as the conspiracy theory about this, I'm not really sure the exact theory they're referring to. People like to claim that maybe some of the Old Testament was written in some sort of weird pre-flood language that no one knows today, but as far as all that goes, it's just kind of speculation. The dark forest theory, I accidentally explained this one earlier, but to summarize one more time, this has to do with the Fermi Paradox. Why haven't we found aliens? Well, the dark forest theory is that the entire galaxy or all of space is like a dark forest, and there is a looming predator out there, so all the alien civilizations remain quiet, because if they put off their signal, they are worried that this great predator, this great advanced civilization, might detect them and wipe them out, because to them, we might be like ants. And if we're out there putting off a bunch of radio signals, they might come over and biologically engineer us to be cattle. I don't want us to be like the Q, so let's we don't need to be sending stuff out into space. Like, what are they going to give us? I guess they might give us cool jetpacks or something. That'd be kind of sick. Or energy sword. That'd be sick. 12th tier, we have presidents are just puppets. So this is just the idea that, you know, the presidents that you see that are in control over the United States or different countries are just a title, and that maybe there's an outside person or group completely controlling these people. This ties into ideas that, like, you know, they get funding from certain people, and then those people are getting things done in their interest. And I'm sure everybody has heard of this theory. I don't feel like it's really that deep, unless you want me to talk about specific instances where they've gotten funding and then done what those people want. Antimatter doppelgangers. So this is the idea: if the universe is infinite, then hypothetically somewhere out there is an identical version of yourself that is made up of antimatter. Also, doing research for this, I found that there was a hypothetical scenario where if you and your antimatter twin shook hands with each other, you could potentially cause an explosion equivalent of 4 gigatons of TNT, which is far beyond any known nuclear weapon that we have. So don't do that. The Great Reset. So this is one of the topics that I think got all my videos banned off of TikTok for this particular series. Officially, the Great Research was the name of the recovery plan created by the World Economic Forum in 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There is also a Great Reset conspiracy theory about how there was this secret plan to spread the outbreak in order to create a huge wealth shift where the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. The theory goes way deeper and gets into things like, well, I can't really talk about it. I don't even think on YouTube I can even talk about all that deeper stuff. I'm sure someone else does a much better job on all that stuff. However, besides the conspiracy theory about like that plan doing all that stuff, what is true is that during this pandemic, the world's 10 richest men more than doubled their fortunes from $700 billion to $1.5 trillion combined during the pandemic. So I'm not saying that specifically the World Economic Forum did this on purpose, but I am saying that this did happen. People did get richer during the pandemic, and there is a much greater wealth differentiating than there was before. So 13th tier, Incan Airplanes, also known as ancient airplanes. I love this theory so much because it reminds me of the ancient astronaut theory, which is that strange thing where there are all these theories about how there was an ancient advanced civilization that really wasn't that advanced, but they like sent people to space somehow. And anyways, Incan Airplanes is kind of similar. There is this strange thing where mainly Incan artifacts were found that strongly resemble a golden looking airplane. People even go as far as saying that if this ancient artifact was built to scale, it could actually fly. And actually, this one guy did build an RC model, and he flew it. So he said it flew very similar to modern day jets and fighters. Many people argue that this isn't even Incan at all, but rather it is Colombian, and that while it looks like aircraft, it is actually just supposed to look like birds or insects or other animals like a flying fish. But it is very strange that it looks so much like an airplane. Tesseract Earth. So this likely refers to Earth being a 4-dimensional hypercube or a tesseract rather than a 3-dimensional spherical planet that we understand today. This might actually just be referring back to the time cube thing that one guy proposed back at the beginning of this iceberg. That was about that pseudoscience conspiracy theory about how a 96-hour day, time's all happening at the same time, and Earth is a cube and all that nonsense. Anyways, I guess this is also referring to how there's also like the cosmic tesseract theory that proposes that the observed expansion of the universe is actually a projection of higher dimensional contraction occurring in 4 spatial dimensions, so outside of our understanding. Bermuda Triangle is a portal. So this is just the idea that the Bermuda Triangle area between Florida, Cuba, and Bermuda is actually a portal or gateway to another dimension, and that all those ships and boats that we lost actually just went to another dimension, and maybe even extraterrestrials used it to travel to places, or time warp or space warp. And yeah. 14th tier, Buzz Aldrin. So Buzz Aldrin was the second man to ever walk on the moon. In 1969, he was the Lunar Module Eagle pilot for Apollo 11. He was an integral part of the mission. A lot of people who believe that the moon landing was faked like to say that he admitted that they didn't go to the moon. Specifically, there was one interview, I believe in 2015, where he was asked by a child, why haven't we gone back to the moon? Or why is it taking such a long time to go back to the moon? And he acts confused in this interview and says, because we didn't. And people take that as him saying, because we didn't go to the moon. But if you look at the context, it looks like he's saying, yeah, we didn't go back to the moon. It has taken a long time. It's weird. I don't think he confessed to not going to the moon, because he doesn't claim that today. Honestly though, if like the moon landing wasn't faked, you guys pester this guy way too much. Like, he does not deserve this. Clockwork Elves, so also known as machine elves. These are these entities that people say they encounter whenever they're under the influence of DMT or ayahuasca. What's strange is a lot of different people, despite being in different locations around the world and having separate trips and not really even talking to each other about it, all report seeing a similar creature that looks like these little elf things that can be playful, but oftentimes they are more mischievous. And while some people believe they are relatively harmless and they like guide you to help you lose your ego or work out your life's problems, others theorize that different civilizations throughout history, such as like the Mayans, who were doing a lot of these types of hallucinogenic drugs, maybe became influenced by these creatures, and maybe they started off, asking for smaller things like, your prisoners, your sick people, sacrifice them to us, until they're asking for more and more things. And at one point, the Mayans were doing 20,000 human sacrifices each year, and that these machine elves or clockwork elves are actually evil and they demand these human sacrifices, and that they're demonic. We are fed negative energy on purpose. So this is the idea that the government, or the shadow government, whoever has control of the media, purposefully feeds us negative energy to make us feel distressed and negative. And maybe they're doing this to somehow harvest our negative energy or like feed off it like they're some sort of like demonic force. I feel like the best analogy for this would be like in Monsters Inc. I watched that movie one time and I felt like it had a much darker meaning, because it's like the monsters you could call a demonic force, and then they go through a portal to another dimension where they scare children to then harvest their fear to power their world. And if this is true, it kind of makes sense why on the news there's always just complete fear mongering and always negative news. And you know what? Go outside. This stuff, it doesn't matter. The news doesn't matter for the most part. People are way too negative, and the real world is not like that. If you live in the woods alone, you would almost not be affected by any of that. I live in the woods and my life is great. I try not to pay attention to the news, but I do sometimes. But yeah, the real world is not as negative as it shows you it is on TV. So don't listen to it. Mars pyramids. So this is referring to these different pyramid structures on Mars There's one specific looking one that they like to say aligns perfectly with the arrangement of the Egyptian pyramids, but very likely these aren't actual pyramids at all, but rather just natural looking hills. There's also this other picture where it was taken by the Mars rover in 2015 that people are arguing looks like an artificially built pyramid. People even go as far as saying that the NASA operators of the Curiosity rover deliberately chose not to take another picture or zoom in on it because they knew it was the advanced civilization that was once there. And some quote how, like the legend of the Anunnaki, it mentions in some of the versions that they visited Mars before coming to Earth, and that maybe they set up a base there, and that's what this pyramid was. And they point to things like the face of Mars, and that, the Sidonian region of Mars where they think there's like the city ruins and whatnot, and the other pyramid called the D and M pyramid structure they say was built by the Anunnaki. 15th tier, life is an unproven theory. So this is more of a philosophical statement about how the scientific community focuses on understanding life's origins, but not proving that life itself exists. This ties in with the idea that people think we're in like a simulation and that technically we can't prove it, and they like to point to people like the famous philosopher Rene Descartes, who questioned everything, including, the external world and his own body, where he was only able to conclude cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. So he thinks he exists, so he does exist. So I guess he was saying that, if he doesn't think that anybody else exists, maybe they don't. Tachyon particles. So this is a hypothetical particle that always travels faster than the speed of light. This would break Einstein's theory of relativity, and this particle is not something that we've seen or measured, but if it did exist, it would be able to do a lot of weird things like go back in time, and it would never slow down past the speed of light. It would actually even get faster as it lost energy, hypothetically. I don't even know where this hypothetical comes from. But anyways, the only reason they propose this idea is so they could think about what going faster than the speed of light would be like in the physics realm. Some conspiracy theorists believe that tachyon particles actually do exist, and that it is tech that has been harnessed by secret government organizations, and that it's some hidden technology from the public, and that they have it and they can use it. And if some sort of evil organization could use something like that, I think we'd kind of be out of luck, wouldn't we? Speaking of being out of luck, we've got Project Bluebeam. So this is a conspiracy theory that claims that the shadow government and the global elites and NASA are all working together to use this advanced technology to fake the apocalypse, or fake the second coming of Christ, ultimately to usher in a new world order and create a totalitarian regime. Some think that they would use things like a fake alien invasion, and they'd be like, oh, these aliens are real and they want to be our friends and we should be friends with them. But really they are demons and they're bringing in the Antichrist, and I hate the Antichrist. I hate the Antichrist. Space is binary code. So this is mainly referring to how a physicist named Dr. James Gates Jr., while he was studying this branch of hypothetical physics called supersymmetry, discovered that there was this mathematical structure that resembled error codes in technology, in physics. So some theorize that this was actual literal computer code in the fabric of our reality, and that space-time is a holographic projection of this binary foundation, and that it's getting debugged by code, like software maintaining its stability. Anyways, it's really confusing and way over my head, and if you want to know more about it, look up James Gates Finds Intelligent Code. He has this thing where he talks with Neil deGrasse Tyson about this, and it's actually really crazy. And Neil deGrasse Tyson's like, this is so... How is this possible? And yeah, it's all hypothetical. It's all hypothetical. 16th tier, 9/11 was by the US. What am I supposed to say? I mean, I'm not going to dive into this. Was 9/11 by the US? Moving on, the cure for cancer is silenced. So this is just a conspiracy theory about big pharma having silenced the cure for cancer to protect their profits, and because they want to make more money, they keep people sick constantly and just treat the cancer instead of curing it. Personally, I don't believe there is a single cure for cancer, as you know, it's not just one disease, it's a lot more complicated than that. There's a lot of different forms. But I will say, I do think that big pharma has gone the wrong way about healing people in a lot of circumstances. Instead of telling people to just, you know, eat healthier and exercise, they get them on the drug. They put them on the happy pill to get rid of their issues, and it's like, that's almost never what you need. Go out. What did I just say? Go outside. Mind-controlled music. So this is referring to the fact that music is able to influence a person's thoughts and emotions and even behaviors by subtly altering one's moods. Some think this could be even more extreme and like synchronize with people's brain waves to induce specific behaviors. So people go a step further and say that the music industry uses subliminal messages to promote their own agendas, such as, for example, consumerism. A lot of rap music is always about that Louis Vuitton name brand, designer, whatever. I don't get that. I don't get the rappers being like, yeah, I got this Louis Vuitton nonsense. It's like, dude, why would you ever want a designer XYZ? That stuff is so incredibly stupid. Anyways, what I find interesting is that the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, had to prohibit subliminal advertising in broadcasts because it appeared that it was too powerful and it wasn't in the public's interest to be influenced by this subliminal advertising that I guess they were doing for a period of time. But in areas like music and movies, subliminal messaging is less regulated because it's considered artistic. Some people go even further. I've heard this theory that I am not saying is true, that rap specifically promotes violence and basically crimes that will land you in prison, and that big private prisons that we have in the US promote rap music and pay rappers to rap about doing these horrible things so that people go to prison. And so it's just pure profit. They're like, oh yeah, you should go get in the car and do these things, and then they go to their prisons and they get more funding for their private prisons, and it's a whole system. And it's, what in the world? Is that true? I don't know. I mean, private prisons are really crazy. And if that was true, man, I'm just saying you should look into that, not anything else beyond that. Just look into private prisons and that sort of thing, because that's really strange. Not saying that's true. The final understanding. So this is a topic that you will find on the bottom of many conspiracy charts, but this is supposed to be about how whenever you look into lots of different perspectives and conspiracy theories like the ones on this chart, you will have a form of enlightenment. Just like in different cultural, spiritual practices, they achieve some sort of enlightenment or nirvana through meditation. You too are getting a form of enlightenment by learning these conspiracy theories, kind of as if you're having a borderline spiritual awakening by realizing that everything isn't exactly what it seems to be. 17th tier, the Vatican is the beast. So this is a very obvious one. This is just a conspiracy theory that seems to have originated during the Protestant Reformation about how, you know, the Pope is the Antichrist and the Vatican is the mark of the beast. And I don't agree with this. I think this is just kind of a fringe claim, and there's really not much more than just that statement. The rapture already happened. So this suggests that the biblical rapture, where some people think that the believers are taken up into heaven before the end times tribulation, actually occurred in the past. And this is often tied in with like the 70 AD destruction of Jerusalem, and the idea that like all the biblical prophecies were fulfilled in the first century, and that we are living in post-rapture hell because of how chaotic society is. But nearly every mainstream view of the Bible and Christianity reject these ideas completely. I just don't really think they line up biblically or historically. Knowledge paradox. The knowledge paradox suggests that the more you truly know, the less you truly grasp, because the knowledge you gain makes you more aware of the vastness of what we actually don't know. So it reveals that everything is much more complex and that the universe is much more unknown, and there's so many more mysteries that we didn't realize is out there. And honestly, that is so true. Webcam Bart. So Webcam Bart is so scary. I'm so scared. It's really not. It is this low quality, realistic looking webcam picture of something that looks like Bart from The Simpsons, but it looks more like this distorted yellow skinned child with spiky hair and asymmetrical eyes. It is kind of eerie, the vacant expression on his face, but there's this weird legend about how this image randomly materialized as a file on Matt Groening's computer, who is the creator of The Simpsons show, and that he was so inspired by this picture that he created the entire Simpsons universe in the show. And some like to say that there is a conspiracy theory around this about how the Simpsons town, Springfield, was a real place that had a nuclear disaster and that it was covered up and erased from our past, and that this image was from a resident of that town, and it's calling out to us from the past as a deformed ghost ruined by nuclear radiation. But in reality, I'm pretty sure this is just like a creepypasta, kind of similar to Smiling Dog. The final tier, tier 18, North Korea equals utopia. So this is an absolutely fringe theory that flips the narrative about North Korea being, an authoritarian, impoverished community that has relatively no economy and horrible human rights violations, but instead that it's actually a hidden paradise that the global powers deliberately misrepresent. And I think this is hilarious because all you gotta do is look at their technology. It's like 40 years behind. Personally, I actually know someone who went to North Korea and he did the whole like propaganda tour and stuff. And he showed me some crazy stuff. He took pictures and stuff. The schools themselves, like the elementary schools, have military propaganda in them. Like a fun board with pretty pictures of trees and smiley faces. They have missiles and tanks as their happy, like artwork in their school. My friend went to a show that the elementary kids put on. He said that they just acted like so robotic and so strange, and that they just smiled the entire performance. It was very weird. There's other people that say they've gone there and they've seen things like fake computer libraries where they have someone hired to just sit there and pretend like he's Googling something, but in reality, they don't have any internet. Infinity Paradox. So this is not one single paradox in general, but there are a lot of versions of infinity paradoxes. I feel like one that best describes the infinity paradox is the one of the infinite hotel paradox. This is a thought experiment by German mathematician David Hilbert, who imagined this hotel with an infinite amount of rooms, all occupied with someone inside. A new guest arrives. Can they also get a room? The answer to this is yes, by shifting each guest from room in to room in plus one, so that room one becomes free for this new guest. So basically, everybody moves one door down, and then there's one room open. So even if an infinite number of guests arrive, the manager can just move each guest from room in to room 2 in, which means he would ask room 1 to move to room 2, room 2 to move to room 4, room 3 to move to room 6, filling up all the even numbered rooms. And the paradox is, despite being full, the hotel can always accommodate more guests. This kind of shows that infinity isn't exactly a number, but rather a concept with unique rules. Anyways, there is this TED Talk video called The Infinite Hotel Paradox that explains this much better than I just did. If you don't understand it, that one probably is better than what I said. Immortality-induced amnesia. So this is essentially an extension of quantum immortality, which, if you don't know, quantum immortality is an idea in quantum mechanics that every possible outcome of an event has happened, is happening, or will happen in separate universes. And every time you die, a new quantum reality is created where you don't die. Immortality-induced amnesia is just talking about how whenever you do die and a new reality is opened up for you where you don't die, you wake up in this reality not knowing that you just died, like you have amnesia. And it kind of reminds me of the movie Donnie Darko. Oh gosh, I don't want to spoil the movie for you, but you know, the story of Donnie Darko. I feel like that's exactly what it is. God's last wish. So this topic was extremely hard to do research on, but I feel like Wendigoon did the best interpreting this one in his video. I actually used a lot of what he said to kind of do research for this explanation. God's last wish is referring to how across nearly every religious tradition, there is a reoccurring theme that God created humanity not as clones or obedient automations, but as companions, and that true companionship requires freedom, because without that freedom, the love, loyalty, and connection would be hollow. According to God's last wish theory, divinity itself willingly fractured, and God broke into infinite pieces to create humanity, and that each person is a fragment of the divine given this free will. Just as in the infinity paradox I just talked about, God's fragmentation was not a loss of power or a weakness, but it kind of reveals the boundless nature of the infinite, just like the infinite hotel, where there's these infinite amount of rooms that can always make space for more. God's essence remains whole even when it is divided because it is infinite. In almost every religion, there is a theme where humanity separates themselves from God because of a selfish choice that they do. And God's last wish implies that humanity does have a purpose, and that is the demonstration of the concept of choice in order to eventually return to the companionship with God in divinity. In conclusion, God's last wish is saying that God destroyed absolute perfection in order to give humanity their own chance and to reunite with God. Anyways, that was the World Conspiracy Theories Iceberg. I tried so long to do a series on this on another platform and it just didn't work out, but I'm really glad that I got to do it on here. And since you are still here, I am so happy that you watched this entire video because I'm sure it is extremely long and I started to lose my voice throughout it, but thank you so much for watching. Before I go, I want to say thank you guys so much for 530,000 subscribers on here. I have just loved so much doing all these iceberg videos. It's so much fun because it's just like there's so many topics, so I get to learn so much, but it takes a really long amount of time. If you want your limited time merch, get your Explore the Mysteries America's National Park shirt before October 31st when it will be gone forever. But yeah, you guys did it. You're making my dreams come true. The time cube, watch out for the 96-hour day. That's going to be a long day. But if you have any video ideas, just put them down in the comments and I will try to read most of these to make some more good icebergs for you guys. But I'm glad so many of you wanted me to do this World Conspiracy Iceberg. I got so many comments on my TikTok asking me to continue it, and I just couldn't continue it on TikTok because I was gonna get banned. I actually got, I don't know how many strikes now on there for talking about these topics specifically, and I don't feel like any of them were really all that bad. But anyways, like I said before, the internet is not the real world, and you guys should go outside and not listen to the news. And thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.